My parents sold my 13-year-old sister's innocence for a Tesla, so I exposed them and watched them rot in prison. 5 years later, Mom reached out begging me to forgive her. When my 13-year-old sister whispered, Dad said I didn't have a choice. It all started when I was 17 and had a crusty iPhone 6 where the charging port barely worked. And Amelia was in the bathroom one day when she left her iPhone 10 beside her bed. Her password was our dog's birthday, so I got in straight away. At the time, I was texting my crush and was going to send a selfie, but I couldn't get the right angle. And as I scrolled through my sister's camera roll, I noticed something. It was flooded with her unclothed self. A nauseous feeling crept into my stomach, and that's when I got the notification. It was from the Whisper app. For those who don't know, it's basically an app where you post anonymously, but it's known for being riddled with kitty fiddlers. I let my protective instinct take over and clicked on it. My heart twisted. My preteen sister was texting dozens of men who all claimed to be over the age of 40, sending her unclothed self to all of them. When I heard the toilet flush and Amelia finally finished taking a fat shit, I put her phone down and acted like nothing happened. That evening, I did something I'll regret forever. I told our parents. I waited until she was asleep and they were both watching Netflix in the living room. At first, I thought they wouldn't believe me since I didn't have any evidence, but to my surprise, they went ballistic. My dad turned to my mom in shock, and my mom had tears in my eyes. Son, thank you for telling us. We'll take it from here. I nodded, and sure enough, my sister's phone was confiscated for the entire month, and even when she got it back, my parents told her they'd be checking it every day. I breathed a sigh of relief and thought that I had fulfilled my role as protective older brother. And I guess when it rains, it pours. Because while my sister was grounded from her phone, my parents replaced their Toyota Corolla that was breaking down every day with a Tesla model. My mom replaced her ring with a crystal that looked real, and my sister's clothes from Goodwill were replaced with Brandy Melville and Urban Outfitters, but I didn't really question it, because up until this point my dad had been non-stop talking about how he was eventually going to figure things out with his law company, and I just figured he had finally landed a huge client. I was chilling beside my sister's room when I glanced over at her phone. She was back on the Whisper app. She was texting so many men that her thumbs were moving at 100 miles per hour. I felt beads of sweat forming on every inch of my body. I instantly texted my mom to inform her that Amelia was doing it again, but this time, she just responded saying I had to learn to respect my sister's privacy because she was 13 now, which meant she could do what she wanted. I had to reread the text on the screen 5 times before her words finally began to sink in. I didn't know what to do because I knew there was no way my sister would listen to me, and I thought going to the cops would get her in trouble. So for a few days, I tried to keep her entertained by playing Minecraft with her, hoping that it would make her realize that she doesn't need to do that. But after just 3 days of this, my parents screamed at me. They said I was distracting Amelia from what's important, and I was banned from playing with her. Every day, my mom was coming home with huge bags of Victoria's Secret undergarments, and even replaced Amelia's phone with the newest iPhone at the time. Her room looked like a show production, with huge lights everywhere, and Amelia went from being a minimalist, sweet little girl, to a girl that spent almost 2 hours every morning perfecting her makeup, hyperfixating on every detail like her life depended on it. So I threw privacy out the window and went through her old phone that was sitting on her desk. Suddenly, everything made sense. Because Amelia wasn't just texting these men, she was running a business. Men ranging from the ages of 40 to 70 were sending her hundreds of dollars in exchange for her photos, videos, and even FaceTime calls. That's when I heard the door open. It was my sister. Please don't tell Mom and Dad you found out, was the first thing she said. I watched as Amelia collapsed to the floor in tears. Dad told me I didn't have a choice, that my work is the only thing keeping this family together. I grabbed her hand and told her that we had to go to the police station. She hugged me super tight and told me she was scared. I told her it was okay to be scared, but it was the right thing to do. When I told the policewoman, it seemed like she was taking the case seriously, and she went into a room to discuss things with her supervisor. And 10 minutes later, the door opened. But it wasn't the policewoman. It was our parents. Turns out my dad had ties with all the police stations in the area and had already told them to inform him if me or my sister ever came to report anything. And to him, I had just jeopardized his little moneymaker, and he was about to make me pay for it. The look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. We were in more danger than ever before. My dad grabbed my arm so hard I thought he might break it. His fingers dug into my skin like steel clamps, and I could feel the bones in my forearm grinding together under the pressure. He dragged me toward the exit while my mom took Amelia's hand, fake smiling at the officers like everything was fine. Her practiced lawyer smile was perfectly in place, but I could see the tension in her jaw and the way her free hand clenched and unclenched at her side. The policewoman who had been helping us was nowhere to be seen, probably called away to another emergency, leaving us vulnerable. In the parking lot, my dad shoved me into the back of the Tesla, while my mom put Amelia in her car. The leather seats were cold against my skin, and the whole ride home was dead silent, except for my dad's heavy breathing and the occasional squeal of tires as he took turns too fast. When we got home, my parents separated us immediately. My dad's hand was like a vice on my shoulder as he pushed me toward my room, while my mom took Amelia to the living room. I could hear them talking to her in low voices for hours, their words rising and falling like waves. I tried to listen through the wall but could only make out bits and pieces, something about responsibility and family loyalty and how I didn't understand the real world. Every time Amelia tried to speak up, her voice small and trembling, they talked over her with increasing volume. I stayed up all night waiting for them to go to bed so I could check on her. The digital clock on my nightstand seemed to mock me as the hours crawled by, 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m., but they never left her room. Around 3 a.m., I tried to sneak out to see her, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor, but my dad was sitting in the hallway like a guard. He was still in his work clothes, tie loosened, just sitting in our old kitchen chair he'd dragged into the hall. He just stared at me until I went back to my room, his eyes cold and unrecognizable. The look on his face was scary scarier than if he'd yelled. It was like looking at a stranger wearing my father's face. When morning came, gray light filtering through my curtains. I tried to leave my room, but the door wouldn't open. I pushed and pulled, my palms sweating against the doorknob, but it was stuck. Then I saw it. They had installed a deadbolt on the outside overnight. The fresh sawdust on the carpet and the smell of new metal confirmed it. My parents had literally locked me in my own room like I was some kind of criminal. I banged on the door and yelled until my throat was raw, but nobody came. My phone was gone from my nightstand too, along with my laptop and tablet. For the next 3 days, they kept me locked inside. They slid meals under the door 3 times a day, just sandwiches and water bottles, sometimes an apple or a granola bar. The sandwiches were always the same, plain turkey and cheese, no condiments, like they couldn't even be bothered to make them properly. I could hear muffled conversations through the walls, and Amelia crying sometimes, her sobs cutting through me like knives. I tried everything to get out. I unscrewed the doorknob with a coin, but the deadbolt still held. I tried to pry open the window, but they had screwed it shut too, the screws fresh and shiny. I was completely trapped in my own bedroom, surrounded by posters and books that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. On the 3rd night, I heard Amelia's voice getting louder through the wall. She was arguing with them about something, her words becoming clearer as her volume increased. I pressed my ear against the wall and could make out fragments. "Can't do this anymore, and please, I'm begging you, and it's wrong." Then I heard a slap, sharp and unmistakable, and everything went quiet. I pounded on the wall with both fists and called her name but got no response. I spent the rest of the night sick with worry, pacing my room like a caged animal, wearing a path in the carpet between my bed and the door. Finally, on the 4th morning, my mom unlocked the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding back was both a relief and terrifying. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, and wouldn't meet my gaze. She was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, wrinkled and stained with coffee. She told me to pack my things because I would be attending a boarding school starting next week. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was reading from a script. She claimed it was for my own good, and that I needed structure and discipline. When I tried to argue, my voice cracking with desperation, she just walked away, her heels clicking down the hallway. My dad was nowhere to be seen, probably at his office, pretending everything was normal. I asked about Amelia, but my mom said she was fine, and that I needed to worry about myself. The dismissive way she said it made my stomach turn. She handed me a suitcase, not even one of mine, but an old one from the attic that smelled like mothballs, and a list of things to pack. The school was supposedly in Montana, hundreds of miles away from everything I knew. The brochure she gave me looked like a prison with its high fences and security cameras. Wilderness Reformation Academy, the cover read, with photos of stern-looking staff and miserable teenagers in uniforms. I knew this wasn't really about my education. It was about getting rid of me. That night, while packing, folding clothes I might never wear again, I lifted my mattress to grab a notebook I kept hidden there. Something crinkled under my hand. It was a folded piece of paper I hadn't seen before, tucked between the mattress and box spring. I opened it carefully, my hands trembling. It was from Amelia, written in her shaky handwriting on a page torn from her math notebook. "I'm scared. Please don't leave me alone with them. They're making me do worse things now. Help me." There were tear stains on the paper, making some of the ink run. My hands shook as I read it over and over, memorizing every word. She must have slipped it under there somehow before they separated us. Maybe during those first chaotic hours when they were installing the lock. I had to do something, but I was running out of time. They were shipping me off in just a few days, and then Amelia would be completely alone with them. I needed help from someone outside the family, but who could I trust? Our extended family lived far away, and my parents had always been careful to maintain a perfect image with the neighbors. At 2 a.m., I climbed out my window. They had screwed it shut, but I managed to break the screws loose using a butter knife I'd saved from one of my pathetic sandwich meals. The metal bent and twisted, cutting into my palms, but desperation gave me strength. I dropped down to the grass, landing harder than expected and jarring my ankles. I crept across our yard, staying in the shadows cast by the moon. Mrs. Harrison lived next door and had always been kind to us. She used to babysit us when we were younger, making us hot chocolate and letting us stay up past bedtime. She always asked how we were doing when she saw us. Really asked, like she actually wanted to know. If anyone would help, it would be her. I knocked softly on her back door, the sound seeming impossibly loud in the quiet night, praying she would answer. After a few minutes that felt like hours, a light came on in her kitchen, and she opened the door in her bathrobe, her gray hair in curlers. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. I must have looked terrible after being locked up for days, unwashed, exhausted, desperate. She pulled me inside immediately, her warm hand gentle on my arm, and asked what was wrong. Everything spilled out in a rush. The photos, the money, the lock on my door, Amelia's note. I showed her screenshots I had secretly emailed myself from Amelia's phone before it was taken. During those precious minutes at the police station, I'd sent them to an old email account my parents didn't know about, one I'd created years ago for a school project. Mrs. Harrison's face went pale as she scrolled through the evidence on her tablet. She kept shaking her head and muttering about how she knew something was off with my parents lately. All those expensive purchases, the new Tesla, my mom's designer bags, the sudden home renovations, had made her suspicious. She'd mentioned it to her husband, wondering if they'd gotten an inheritance or something. She called her daughter Angela right away, even though it was the middle of the night. Her hands shook as she dialed, and she had to try twice to get the number right. Angela worked at a non-profit for exploited children and knew exactly what to do. Within hours, as dawn was breaking, a social worker arrived at Mrs. Harrison's house. Her name was Michelle, and she had kind eyes, but a serious expression. She wore jeans and a sweater, like she'd thrown on whatever was closest when she got the call. She took notes as I told her everything, asking detailed questions about dates and times, her pen moving quickly across her notepad. But when Michelle went to our house with the police later that morning, my parents had coached Amelia perfectly. I watched from Mrs. Harrison's window, my heart sinking with each passing moment, as they all stood in our driveway. The morning sun made everything look normal, peaceful even. Amelia denied everything, saying I was making it up because I was jealous of her new clothes and phone. She even smiled and laughed, playing the part of a happy teenager without a care in the world. The performance was flawless. She'd learned from 2 lawyers how to lie convincingly. My parents presented themselves as concerned, loving guardians, worried about their troubled son who was creating drama for attention. The social worker left with promises to follow up, but I could tell from her body language that she was doubting my story now. My parents were good at manipulation. They were both lawyers after all, trained in the art of persuasion. They knew exactly what to say and how to act, what clothes to wear to look respectable but not too wealthy. As soon as the cars pulled away, my dad looked directly at Mrs. Harrison's house. He knew where I was, and the look he gave was a clear threat. I couldn't go back home now. Mrs. Harrison said I could stay with her, setting up the fold-out couch in her den, but we both knew my parents would come for me eventually. I was a minor, and they were my legal guardians. The law was on their side unless I could prove what they were doing to Amelia, but she was too scared or too brainwashed to tell the truth. Years of being the good daughter, of wanting to please them, had made her the perfect victim. That night I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning on the unfamiliar couch. I used Mrs. Harrison's computer to research what to do. I created anonymous accounts on parenting forums and described the situation without using names or identifying details. The responses poured in within hours. Hundreds of people urged me to document everything and contact specific organizations. Some shared their own horror stories of family exploitation, tales that made me realize how common this kind of abuse really was. One message stood out from the others. A woman claiming to be a retired family court judge gave detailed advice about recording conversations and gathering evidence legally. She explained recording laws in our state. We were in a one-party consent state, meaning I could record conversations I was part of. She said what would hold up in court versus what would be dismissed as hearsay. She said I needed concrete proof, not just accusations. Audio recordings would be key, along with any financial records I could obtain. I spent the next day planning while Mrs. Harrison went about her routine, trying to act normal in case my parents were watching. She brought me meals and checked on me regularly, her face creased with worry. I found an old MP3 player in her garage, buried in a box of her son's things from high school. Her son had left it behind years ago when he went to college. It still worked and had a recording function with surprisingly good quality. I tested it several times to make sure the audio was clear, recording myself reading from a book and playing it back. I hid it in my pocket and practiced turning it on without looking, memorizing the exact sequence of buttons. Before going back, I prepared myself mentally. Mrs. Harrison let me borrow her phone to text my parents, pretending I was ready to come home and apologize. I wrote and rewrote the message a dozen times, trying to strike the right tone of defeat and submission. They were suspicious at first, my dad sending terse one-word responses, but eventually, they agreed to let me return. They probably figured it was better to have me where they could control me than out in the world where I might cause more trouble. My dad said he would pick me up that evening after work. My dad barely spoke during the drive home, his jaw clenched tight. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the electric engine and the sound of other cars passing. When we arrived, my mom hugged me like nothing had happened, her perfume overwhelming. She said she was glad I had come to my senses and that we could put this whole unfortunate incident behind us. Amelia was in her room with the door closed. They wouldn't let me see her, saying she was busy with homework and needed to concentrate, but I could hear the fake camera shutter sounds from her phone, that artificial click that had become the soundtrack to our nightmare. At dinner, my parents acted normal, talking about the weather and asking about school like I hadn't been locked in my room for days. My mom had made lasagna, my former favorite, like that would somehow make everything okay, but there was a tension underneath everything, like a wire stretched too tight. I kept the MP3 player recording in my pocket the whole time, my hand occasionally brushing against it to make sure it was still running. After we ate, my dad asked to speak with me privately in his office. This was what I had been waiting for. He closed the heavy oak door and turned to face me. His whole demeanor changed instantly, the mask dropping. He grabbed my shoulders and squeezed hard, his fingers finding the exact spots that were still tender from before. He told me I had no idea what I'd almost cost the family. His voice was low and dangerous as he explained that Amelia's work was the only thing keeping us afloat. Without it, we'd lose the house, the cars, everything. He said I was being selfish and naive, that I didn't understand the sacrifices parents had to make. I asked him how he could do this to his own daughter, my voice barely steady. That's when he really lost it. He shoved me against the wall, my head hitting the bookshelf behind me, and said I didn't understand how the world worked. He said Amelia was smart and mature for her age, and that she was choosing to help the family. He claimed other kids her age were doing far worse things, substances, violence, actual prostitution, and at least she was safe at home where they could protect her. The mental gymnastics were staggering. The threats got more specific. He said if I interfered again, he would make sure I was sent somewhere I'd never be found. He mentioned boarding schools that were more like work camps, places in Utah and Montana where troubled kids disappeared for years, places where they broke you down and rebuilt you into someone compliant. He said he had connections everywhere through his law practice, and nobody would believe a delinquent teenager over 2 successful lawyers. My mom walked in then, closing the door behind her, and backed him up completely. She started guilt-tripping me about how Amelia's work was paying for my future college. She pulled out bank statements showing the college fund they'd started, the numbers growing each month. She said they were building a nest egg for both of us, and that I was being ungrateful. She claimed they were protecting Amelia by monitoring everything and keeping her safe from real predators who might hurt her. In their twisted logic, they were the heroes of this story, protecting their daughter while securing our family's future. The mental gymnastics were insane, but they seemed to really believe their own lies. For the next 3 days, I pretended to accept my fate. I acted defeated and stopped asking about Amelia. I went to school like normal, keeping my head down in classes, and came straight home. But I was recording everything, every conversation, every threat, every admission. The MP3 player was filling up with evidence, and I had to delete old music files to make room. I also took photos of the bruises my dad left on my arms, purple and green marks in the shape of fingers. I snuck into Amelia's room one night when my parents were asleep. Their bedroom was at the other end of the house, but I still moved like a ghost, avoiding every creaky floorboard I'd memorized over the years. She was awake, staring at her phone in the dark, the screen's glow making her face look ghostly. When she saw me, she started crying silently, tears streaming down her face. She showed me her phone. The messages were worse than before. The men were getting more demanding, some asking for videos now instead of just photos. Some were threatening to expose her if she didn't send more content, saying they'd send the photos to her school or post them online. She was trapped between them and our parents, with no good options. She told me our dad had increased her quotas. She had to make a certain amount each week, $5,000 minimum, or he would get angry. He had spreadsheets tracking everything, treating her like a business. He had even hired someone to edit her photos to make them look more professional, some creep he found online who specialized in this kind of thing. Our mom was managing her wardrobe, buying specific outfits the men requested, and teaching her how to pose to look older. She'd bookmarked makeup tutorials for aging up young faces. It was a sick family business, and they had convinced themselves it was normal, just another revenue stream like dad's law practice or mom's consulting work. 3 days before I was supposed to leave for boarding school, everything came to a head. During dinner, another family meal where we all pretended everything was fine, Amelia suddenly broke down. She threw her phone across the room, the case cracking against the wall, and screamed that she wanted it to stop. She said she felt dirty all the time and couldn't sleep anymore without nightmares. She begged our parents to let her be a normal kid again, to let her delete the apps and go back to her art and her friends. The raw pain in her voice was heartbreaking, years of suppressed trauma pouring out at once. My mom immediately sent her to her room, her voice sharp and cold, while my dad grabbed my arm hard enough to leave new bruises over the old ones. He dragged me to the garage, past the Tesla and the new riding mower they'd bought with Amelia's money. He told me this was my last chance to fall in line. He said if I didn't support the family, I wasn't part of the family. His grip was so tight, I thought he might actually break my wrist this time. I could see he was losing control of the situation, and that made him dangerous, like a cornered animal. That night, I knew I had to act fast. I used Mrs. Harrison's phone to call the nonprofit directly. Angela answered even though it was past 10 p.m., her voice alert despite the hour. I played her all the recordings from my MP3 player, holding the phone up to the tiny speaker. The evidence was undeniable. My parents admitting to everything, threatening me, discussing quotas and payments like Amelia was a product instead of their daughter. Angela said she would handle it personally and told me to keep Amelia safe if I could. She said she was calling in favors and pulling strings to fast-track this. The next morning, my parents were preparing to drive me to boarding school. My suitcase was already in the car, and they were rushing me to leave before I could say goodbye to Amelia. My mom kept checking her watch, saying we needed to make our flight. That's when 2 caseworkers arrived with a court order for emergency custody removal. Angela had worked through the night to get it, calling judges at home and presenting the evidence. My parents tried to refuse entry, my dad using his lawyer voice to demand warrants and threaten lawsuits, but the workers had already contacted law enforcement. As officers arrived, their presence making everything suddenly real, my dad tried to claim the recordings were edited. He said I was tech-savvy and had manipulated the audio using software. He pointed to the bruises on my arms and said they were from sports, even though I hadn't played anything in months and everyone knew it. My mom cried perfectly on cue and said we were destroying our family over a misunderstanding, that they were good parents who had made some poor financial decisions but never hurt their children. They were convincing liars, but the evidence was too strong. That's when Amelia finally found her courage. Maybe it was seeing the police and knowing she was safe, or maybe she just couldn't pretend anymore. She came out of her room, still in her pajamas, looking so young and vulnerable. She told them everything, how it started when she was 12, just modeling photos, they said, how it escalated slowly, so slowly she didn't realize how bad it had gotten until it was too late. She explained what they made her do, how much money was involved, how they told her she was saving the family. She showed them the messages on her phone and the banking apps our parents used. Her voice was small but steady as she spoke her truth, and I had never been prouder of her. The officers separated us from our parents while they investigated. We watched from the back of a police car as they led our parents away in handcuffs, our mom still crying and our dad stone-faced. We were placed with our Aunt Sarah from our mom's side, who drove 2 hours to get us that same day. She lived in a small town where nobody knew our family's reputation. She had no idea what had been happening. My parents had isolated us from extended family, claiming everyone was too busy to visit. She was horrified when she learned the truth, crying as she held Amelia and promised to keep us safe. During the investigation, more evidence emerged. The forensic team recovered deleted messages from cloud backups, showing the full extent of the operation. There were conversations going back 2 years, thousands of messages my parents thought they'd erased. Bank records revealed large deposits from dozens of men across the country, some international transfers too. Some of Amelia's photos had been sold on websites overseas, distributed beyond what even my parents knew. The scope was bigger than even I had realized. My parents had turned their daughter into a product, packaging and selling her innocence to the highest bidders. The legal process took months. My parents tried various defenses through their high-powered lawyer friends. First, they claimed they were protecting Amelia by monitoring her online activity, that they'd discovered she was taking photos on her own and stepped in to supervise. When that didn't work, they said they were desperate and about to lose everything, that the economy had destroyed Dad's practice. They painted themselves as victims of circumstance who made a terrible mistake under pressure. Their lawyer argued for leniency based on their previous clean records and standing in the community. But the prosecutor had recordings of my dad threatening me and admitting to everything. They had documentation description of the emotional and psychological damage to Amelia from court-appointed therapists. Child exploitation experts testified about the long-term trauma this kind of abuse causes, how it rewires young brains and destroys trust. The judge, a woman with daughters of her own, saw through all their excuses. Both of my parents were convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to prison. 8 years for my dad, 6 for my mom. Throughout everything, I testified about finding the initial evidence and trying to protect my sister. It was hard reliving those moments in court, seeing my parents in orange jumpsuits, but I knew Amelia needed me to be strong. She was getting intensive counseling and support to heal from the trauma. Some days were harder than others. She would have nightmares or panic attacks when she saw older men who looked like the ones from the app. She couldn't stand the sound of camera shutters and would freeze when anyone tried to take a photo, even innocent family pictures. Our Aunt Sarah was amazing through it all. She took time off work to be there for every court date and therapy session, never complaining about the disruption to her quiet life. She turned her guest room into a safe space for Amelia, painting it in soft lavender and filling it with books and art supplies. She never pushed us to talk, but was always there when we needed her, often just sitting quietly while we processed everything. She helped us learn what a real family was supposed to be like. Supportive without conditions, protective without control. Slowly, Amelia started to heal. She deleted all social media and focused on school and real friendships. She joined the art club and discovered she loved painting, especially watercolors of landscapes, places far away from cameras and phones. She started volunteering at an animal shelter, finding peace in caring for creatures who loved unconditionally. She was returning to the sweet minimalist girl she once was before everything happened, but stronger now. Sometimes I would catch her humming while she painted, old songs our grandmother used to sing, and it was the most beautiful sound in the world. We both learned to trust again, knowing we had saved each other. I learned that being a protective older brother meant more than just keeping secrets. It meant fighting for what was right, even when it was scary, even when it cost everything. Amelia learned that she was worth more than what those men paid for her photos. She was worth everything just by being herself, her kindness, her creativity, her resilience. We learned that family isn't about blood or obligation, but about choosing to protect and support each other. Our parents' house was sold to pay for legal fees and restitution. We didn't want anything from it anyway. Too many bad memories soaked into those walls. Sarah helped us pack up our old rooms on a gray autumn day, keeping only what really mattered. Photo albums from before everything went wrong, Amelia's art supplies, my books, small treasures from a childhood that ended too soon. I found the note Amelia had left under my mattress and gave it back to her. She read it once, then burned it in Sarah's fireplace, watching the smoke carry away that desperate plea. She hugged me and said I was the best brother in the world, and for the first time in years, I actually believed it. The next few months were rough, but we were finally free. Sarah's house became our sanctuary, this little 2-story place with a big backyard and a vegetable garden she tended every morning. She set us up with new routines that felt normal for the first time in forever. Amelia went to the local middle school where nobody knew our story, and I finished my senior year at the high school down the road. We ate dinner together every night at 6 p.m. sharp, talking about regular stuff like homework and what was on TV. But the legal stuff wasn't over. The prosecutor called me constantly with updates and questions. They found more victims. Turned out my parents had been coaching other families to do the same thing with their kids. My dad had been running seminars disguised as financial planning for families, where he taught desperate parents how to exploit their children online. The FBI got involved when they traced payments across state lines. I had to testify 3 more times, each time seeing my parents get thinner and grayer in their jumpsuits. Amelia struggled with the therapy at first. She'd sit in Dr. Michelle's office for full sessions without saying a word, just drawing in her notebook. The therapist was patient though, never pushing, just being present. After about 2 months, Amelia finally started talking. First, just about small things like how she missed our old dog who died the year before. Then gradually about the photos and the men and how dirty she felt all the time. Some nights she'd wake up screaming and Sarah would sit with her until dawn, making hot chocolate and playing card games. School was weird for both of us. I couldn't focus on normal teenage stuff when I knew what we'd been through. My classmates complained about curfews and not getting the newest iPhone while I was dealing with FBI agents and court dates. I made one friend though, this kid Tyler whose parents had gone through a nasty divorce. He didn't ask questions when I had to leave early for court or when I couldn't hang out because Amelia needed me. He just accepted that I had heavy stuff going on. The trial date kept getting pushed back because my parents' lawyer kept filing motions. They tried to get the recordings thrown out, claiming I'd violated wiretapping laws. When that failed, they tried to argue entrapment, saying I'd manipulated them into confessing. Every delay meant more anxiety for us. Amelia started having panic attacks when brown envelopes arrived from the court. She'd see the official seal and just freeze up, her breathing getting shallow until Sarah or I could calm her down. One day, about 4 months after we'd moved in with Sarah, Amelia asked if she could see the recordings. I didn't want to play them for her, but the therapist said it might help her process what happened. So we sat in Dr. Michelle's office and listened to our dad describing her like a product, talking about profit margins and market demand. Amelia cried through the whole thing, but afterward she said she was glad she heard it. She said it helped her understand that none of it was her fault, that they'd planned everything. The worst part was when other kids from our old school found out. Someone's parent who worked at the courthouse leaked details and suddenly everyone knew. Kids were screenshotting news articles and sharing them in group chats. Some sick creep even found old photos that had been posted online and shared those too. Sarah had to get lawyers involved to get them taken down. We both deleted all our social media and changed our phone numbers. Amelia didn't leave the house for 2 weeks after that, too scared of running into someone who'd seen the photos. But Sarah's neighbors were amazing. Mrs. Chen from next door started bringing over fresh vegetables from her garden, never asking questions, but always checking if we needed anything. Mr. Rodriguez taught me how to fix cars in his garage, giving me something to focus on besides the trial. His daughter Gloria was in Amelia's grade and became her first real friend there, inviting her to sleepovers and treating her like any other kid. The whole neighborhood seemed to form this protective bubble around us without making a big deal about it. 6 months in, my parents' lawyer reached out about a plea deal. They wanted to plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for shorter sentences, 3 years instead of 6 to 8. The prosecutor asked what we thought. Amelia surprised everyone by saying no. She wanted them to face the full consequences of what they'd done. She was tired of them trying to minimize and manipulate their way out of trouble. I backed her up completely. Sarah said she'd support whatever we decided. The trial finally happened 8 months after that first night I found the photos. Walking into the courtroom felt surreal. My parents sat at the defense table looking like strangers. My mom had lost weight and her hair was completely gray. My dad kept his eyes down the whole time, never looking at us. Their lawyer painted them as desperate parents who made a terrible mistake, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they read the guilty verdict, my mom broke down sobbing. My dad just nodded like he'd expected it. Amelia grabbed my hand so tight I thought she'd break my fingers. During victim impact statements, I talked about finding my little sister's photos and realizing our parents had turned her into a commodity. Amelia wrote a letter that the prosecutor read for her about losing her childhood and learning to trust again. Even the judge looked emotional. Sentencing happened 2 weeks later. My dad got 10 years, my mom got 7. They'd have to register as SX offenders and could never have unsupervised contact with minors again. As they led them away in handcuffs, my mom looked back at us. I saw her mouth, "I'm sorry," but Amelia had already turned away. That was the last time we saw them. After the trial, things slowly got better. Amelia threw herself into her art, painting these beautiful landscapes of places she wanted to visit someday. She started selling them at local craft fairs, earning her own money in a way that made her proud. She joined the school's environmental club and made friends who cared about saving sea turtles and planting trees, normal kid stuff that she'd missed out on before. I graduated high school and got into a state college about an hour away. I almost didn't go, worried about leaving Amelia, but she insisted. She said I'd saved her, and now I needed to save myself by building my own life. Sarah promised to call if anything happened. I majored in social work, wanting to help other kids in bad situations. My professors said I had unusual insight for someone so young, if only they knew. Amelia came to visit me at college once a month. We'd get pizza and walk around campus, talking about everything and nothing. She told me about her new art teacher who was helping her apply to specialized high school programs. She was thinking about becoming an art therapist someday, helping other kids heal through creativity. She still had bad days. Certain sounds or smells would trigger memories, but they were getting less frequent. Sarah officially adopted us a year after the trial ended. The paperwork was just a formality since she'd already become our real parent in every way that mattered. We had a small celebration in her backyard with the neighbors. Mrs. Chen made dumplings and Mr. Rodriguez grilled burgers. Amelia painted a portrait of the 3 of us that Sarah hung in the living room. It was the first time our little makeshift family felt permanent and safe. 2 years later, I was home from college for winter break when Amelia showed me a letter. One of the men who'd bought photos had been arrested and wanted to apologize as part of his plea deal. She asked if she should read it. I said it was her choice. She thought about it for days before deciding to burn it unopened in Sarah's fireplace. She said she didn't need his apology to move forward. She was already healing on her own terms. The money from our parents' house went into a trust for our education and therapy. Neither of us wanted to touch it at first. It felt tainted, but Sarah helped us see it as taking back what was stolen from us. Amelia used some for art supplies and a summer program in Italy. I used it for textbooks and to help other students who couldn't afford them. We turned something dirty into something useful. I started dating a girl named Michelle in my junior year. Telling her about our past was terrifying, but she just held my hand and thanked me for trusting her. She came to Thanksgiving at Sarah's and fit right in. Amelia grilled her about her intentions like a protective little sister should. Watching them laugh together in the kitchen made my chest tight with happiness. We were building the family we should have had all along. Amelia graduated high school with honors and got into art school on a full scholarship. Her portfolio was full of paintings about resilience and growth, flowers breaking through concrete, storms clearing to reveal sunlight. The admissions committee said her work showed unusual emotional depth. At her graduation, she gave a speech about second chances and finding beauty after darkness. She didn't mention our parents or what happened, but everyone who knew our story understood. 5 years after that night I found the photos. We were okay. Not perfect, still healing, but okay. Amelia was thriving in art school and had her first gallery show planned. I was working at a nonprofit helping at-risk youth, using everything I'd learned to spot the signs others might miss. Sarah was still our rock, never asking for thanks, but always there when we needed her. We had Sunday dinners and holiday traditions, and inside jokes like any other family. Sometimes I think about our parents in prison. I wonder if they really understand what they did, or if they still see themselves as victims of circumstance. Amelia says it doesn't matter what they think anymore. We survived them. We saved each other. And now we're building lives filled with the kind of love that protects instead of exploits. That's the only revenge that matters, living well despite everything they tried to take from us.